Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. The divisional round of the NFL playoffs are here, and I've got an NFL DFS first look for you on DraftKings for this weekend. The 4-game slate. We actually got some good games this weekend. We've got a couple of defensive matchups. Minnesota squares off against San Francisco in San Fran for the first game at 1:35 p.m. for me on the West Coast. The best and only rational time zone in the United States of America. Tennessee squares off against Baltimore also on Saturday. The Sunday games, Houston travels to Kansas City in the highest totaled game of the weekend, and Seattle squares off against Green Bay. We're going to take a look at the quarterbacks on this. I'm going to put together kind of a first look lineup to see what we're going to be able to fit. Obviously, as more content comes out throughout the week, I'm going to have my article done by Wednesday on this week, because now that the holidays have passed, no more Christmas on Wednesday or New Year's on Wednesday, taking up my time in the middle of the week. I'll have my article turned into the folks at ESPN, and it'll be published on Thursday morning. First thing Thursday morning. We will also do a recording of the 06010 podcast with myself, Mike Clay, and Daniel Dopp that morning as well. Right after that, I will be doing the Daily Fantasy Edge podcast with Adam Levitan and Peter Jennings, CSU Ram 88. For those of you who know him, that is his name across the industry. Both of those podcasts will be on Thursday as well. We'll have a better look at things as the weeks go on, or as the week goes on, and then we'll reconvene here on twitch.tv. Every one of these videos is recorded live on Twitch. There's a link down below in the description. If you just click show more, you'll find the link. Drop on over, give me a follow. I'd love to get to meet you on one of the live streams. So we're going to go over this. Obviously, we'll have a better look later in the week. This is just a first look. I haven't really done any massive research on this slate yet. No projections are out for this slate yet, so this is just kind of an off the top, off the cuff first look, as we do every week. If you're new to the channel, please take it as such. This is not a full lineup, not a copy pasta situation. If you are here, thank you, I appreciate it. If you're returning, drop a like on the video. If you're new, subscribe to the channel, ring that notifications bell, and let's take a look at what we have on this slate. First thing we're going to do, we're going to stop at the totals and the spreads to kind of look at what Vegas believes about this. The Vikings against the San Francisco 49ers. San Francisco favored by 6.5. All the home teams favored as expected in the divisional round. A couple of big favorites though. The last game on the slate is the closest of them. 45.5 points for the over-under in this San Fran Vikings game. It's a little higher than I expected it, so we're going to have to take a look at some of the 49ers with their team total sitting around 26 or 26.5. That's a very respectable team total. What they're expecting here. Usually the 49ers don't drop back a ton, or they don't want to drop back a ton. But the Vikings have been way more susceptible through the air than they have been on the ground. A very tough run defense. So we'll take a look and see what we can do there. Tennessee going to Baltimore. I don't see very many ways that they're going to be able to stop that rushing offense for the Ravens. But I'm always willing to be more projectable with my lineup building when it comes to shorter slates. You're going to want to say, okay, if this is going to happen, Daily Fantasy Sports is very much about if-then statements. If this is going to happen, then this is going to be the scenario. So if you think the Titans can play this game super close, or possibly play this game with a lead, you know, not a massive lead. They don't need to win by 20, right? You're not going to say, oh, the Titans are going to win on the field by 25 points and it's going to be all over. If you think the Titans can have the lead in this game and play from ahead, even if you think the Ravens are going to win the game or maybe cover the spread late, there's a lot of paths to somebody like Derrick Henry being a viable play, even as a road underdog of 8.5 points. So I allow more projectability in your lineup building on a shorter slate in the playoffs than I would on a full slate, where I kind of lean more on the actual projections because we can get there on volume. I am also going to lean more on touchdown expectation, touchdown EV, just like we did the first week of the playoffs. It's why I favored somebody like DK Metcalf. It's why we favored somebody like Derrick Henry. We wanted all the players that could get themselves into the end zone because of their volume inside the 5-yard line, because of their volume on end zone targets and red zone targets. And we're going to do the same here in the divisional round of the playoffs. So Houston against the Chiefs in Kansas City. Chiefs by 9.5. You're going to want to build some stacks around Patrick Mahomes for tournaments. Obviously stacks, double stacks. You can bring it back with the Texans, because while the Chiefs defense has been much better recently, this does have the highest total on the slate. Kansas City favored by 9.5, and Houston, while they're projected to play from behind, Kansas City has been most susceptible to opposing running games. I don't think that the Texans, I'm not saying we're going to jam Carlos Hyde here, but he is at a little bit of a solid price for us to at least consider in those lineups where we're trying to tell that story. But there's a lot of paths to success here with Watson to X receiver or 2 receivers with Kansas City pass catchers coming back, and the Seahawks go to Green Bay to square off against the Packers. There's some questions in this game that we have to take a look at as well. So we're going to start with the quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson, the highest scoring quarterback on the list. He was a QB1 and an RB1 this year if you just take his rushing totals. Just an absolutely ridiculous year for him. 1,200 rushing yards with 7 touchdowns on the ground. That's basically an RB1. And 3,000 yards passing with 36 touchdowns. Performed exceptionally well. Ridiculously high touchdown percentage because of the style of offense that they run, and he's been able to repeat it with multiple touchdowns, 3 or more in many games this year. Has not had a 40-point fantasy day, but has had multiple 30-point plus days with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them this year, half of his games. And he sat the fourth quarter in many of those games. Unlikely that they get up 30 or 40 points in the playoffs where the starting crew will sit the fourth quarter, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. I do think that they're going to be able to run the ball effectively against this Tennessee Titans defense, especially with an extra week of rest to allow somebody like Mark Ingram to get back to full health, having that extra bye week for the first week of the playoffs while Tennessee was grinding it out in New England. Now you've got to go to Baltimore and face a rested Baltimore offense. It's had an extra week to game plan for you. So this situation for me is pretty solid for Lamar Jackson, but you're going to have to pay way up to get him at 8,400. I think there are paths to getting him. If you want to build differentiated lineups that aren't going to have him, you can do so because it's 900 less to get to Patrick Mahomes. And we kind of know that if you're going to play Patrick Mahomes and you want to stack or double stack with him, it's a very viable tournament strategy to stack or double stack a quarterback with 1 or 2 of his pass catchers. Plugging in Patrick Mahomes, you can very simply look at his team and say, okay, we're going to plug KELCE with him and Tyreek Hill. And then I'm going to build the rest of this lineup. We're going to bring one guy back on Houston. Let's say Hopkins is in there. And now we have 4,200 left to build this lineup with. That would be a pretty standard Patrick Mahomes double stack with one guy bringing it back sort of lineup. And the reason lineups are built this way, highly correlated lineups with somebody who, if you think this game is going to be close and a high scoring game, bringing it back, it's much harder to pick 9 of the top scorers on a slate as opposed to saying, if this game shoots out, these 4 guys will probably do pretty well. And then I really only have to find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players individually that aren't correlated with this group. It's much easier to pick 5 winners than it is to pick 9 winners. So building correlated lineups for tournament is a way to Ricky Bobby yourself. You either finish first or you finish last, but you don't have to really hit on 9 spots. You're really trying to hit on 5. So this is going to be a very popular start for people to go with if they're building Patrick Mahomes lineups. Going back to the quarterbacks here, Deshaun Watson, same idea as if you're building those tournament lineups with Patrick Mahomes. You would probably do the same thing with Deshaun Watson. They believe where we sit right now that Will Fuller should be back this week. Deshaun Watson has been much more efficient over the last 3 seasons when Will Fuller is active versus when he's not. Though against Buffalo last week, 80% completions on 25 dropbacks, no interceptions, was extremely efficient without Fuller there. Threw for 247 yards. That exceeded his expectation versus games where he has played without Will Fuller active over the past 3 seasons. And he chipped in with 55 rushing yards and a touchdown in that game, the highest scoring quarterback during the wild card round. You would build lineups very similarly with Watson, just like you did if you're trying to build tournament lineups, just like we did the other direction. Probably going to plug somebody like Hopkins. I'm going to probably bring this back with 2 guys, maybe somebody like Williams, also somebody like KELCE. And I have 4,700 to spend to build those lineups there in that direction, filling in with whatever you need or want to fill in with him. And then the quarterbacks get a little bit cheaper. We still have Russ Wilson against Green Bay. Russ is awesome. The price is fair. We know where the ball is going to go through the air too. There's only 3 very viable targets. 4 if you bring in David Moore in the chance that his other receiver is out in this situation. So Russ Wilson, in the sense that like Jerron Brown is out, David Moore runs a lot more routes. He's never going to be really a super high ceiling guy. He's not the same, utilization that he was last year, where he was getting a lot of end zone usage and red zone usage, though on low volume. All of that usage this year has flowed towards DK Metcalf, leading the league in end zone targets and one of the league leaders in terms of red zone targets, though second on his team to Tyler Lockett in that respect. The price that stands out to me as being not right is Aaron Rodgers, but it's not right in the wrong way. Aaron Rodgers, based on the expectation, the scoring, the offenses, his fantasy ability in 2019, 2020, this is a $6,000 DraftKings quarterback. I believe that he's overpriced here by almost 10% at 6,500. I would be buying at 6,000. At 6,500, I think he's only viable in tournaments that you are stacking in the manner that we just said. It is possible, very possible, that somebody like Davante Adams has a exceptional day, like he has the past 3 games, with 22.3 to 26.6 DraftKings points and 13 to 16 targets every single week, touchdowns scored in 2 of those games, and with that scoring, sad trombone for Aaron Rodgers over those 3 weeks. Top 20 points only once, top 14.5 points only once in those 3 weeks. So it's extremely possible for the position player to have themselves a great week that could help you win your head-to-heads or help you win your tournaments or be in position to win a tournament without Aaron Rodgers going off. So yes, they are highly correlated. No, Aaron Rodgers is not necessary to play somebody like Davante Adams. The receivers can go off without the quarterback having a big day. Now, if Davante Adams has 2 or 3 touchdowns, obviously Aaron Rodgers also had 2 or 3 touchdowns and had a big day, but we're showing that he can get you 20 to 30 or 35 DraftKings points without Aaron Rodgers, busting a grape, basically. Kirk Cousins going up against San Francisco. I tend to not play quarterbacks against San Francisco, but I'm willing to break the rules for tournaments, and I'm even more willing to break the rules on short slates, especially in the playoffs. If you believe that this game is going to result in Minnesota playing from behind and having to throw a bunch of extra plays, maybe Kirk Cousins has a pass to 300 yards, you know where the ball is going to go through the air. It's going to go to either Thielen, Diggs, and then Cook, and then Rudolph in that order, maybe a couple of targets towards Irv. But realistically speaking, not a difficult guy to stack if you think that he can get you there. Because as I said, the total in this game is a little bit higher than I expected it to be. I was expecting somewhere between 39 and 41.5 points. It opened at 45.5 points. And that's not insignificant to have, 5 to 6 more points on the total than what I kind of was expecting out of this game, with 2 defenses that both play the run very, very tough in San Francisco, though not the same defense they were at the beginning of the season. A very tough defense in their own right. Jimmy Garoppolo, very big difference here between his floor and his ceiling. So while guys like Lamar Jackson have an extremely high floor and access to a 30 to 40 point ceiling, that's not the case with Jimmy Garoppolo. Garoppolo is a 10 to 12 fantasy point guy, or he's a 30 plus fantasy point guy on DraftKings. He has gotten you over 30 points 3 times this year, over 21 other time. This is a run first team that does not want to drop back a bunch. If they get a lead, they are going to play the running game, and they're going to play field position, and they're going to try to stay away from dropping Garoppolo back a ton. Now, people are going to look and say, well, he dropped back 34, 35, 40 times against teams, but look at the teams that he dropped back against and the pace of those games and the pace of play of those games. Atlanta, very fast team. New Orleans, fast team. Arizona speeds everybody up. Seattle plays pretty quick and forces you to score, as this game was one that shot out. The games against Seattle were very entertaining between Seattle and San Francisco this year. Carolina, they ran the ball a ton. Arizona, again, 37. You look at the teams that played good defense. Pittsburgh is really the only one that they dropped back over 30 times against. 27 against Tampa, who is terrible against the pass. 25 against Cincinnati, 29 against Cleveland, 21, 22, 20. And as they play some of these games with big leads, he doesn't have to drop back a ton. So there's danger that Garoppolo could end this day with 12 or 13 DraftKings points, but he could also put up a 3 or a 4 touchdown day, which gets you to those high 20s. So Big variance play here for Garoppolo. I think that he has some players that can get there on volume at his position spots, not unlike the situation I was talking about with Davante Adams to Aaron Rodgers. Guys like Kittle, guys like Mostert, and some of his pass catchers, I think can get there on the volume that they're going to get versus their salary without Garoppolo having a 30-point day. But if he does have a 30-point day, they're absolutely going to blow up. Final quarterback, Ryan Tannehill at 5,400. Again, allowing for projecting. If you believe that Tannehill is going to be forced to keep up with Baltimore, then there's a good chance that he throws for 300 yards. If you believe they're going to be playing from behind but competitive. My issue, or my concern, more than issue, with Ryan Tannehill this week is I believe that Baltimore is going to be very, very successful running the football. Which means that they're going to bleed a lot of clock. Which means that Ryan Tannehill may not get all that many opportunities to drop back. I'm thinking towards the DeMarco Murray Cowboys from a few years ago, where they would hold the ball for 38, 39, 40 minutes a game. This Titans offense, there's a lot of meat on the bone, so to speak, in the bell curve for the ways that this game could turn out, where the Titans really only have the ball for 22 minutes. And a lot of the plays that they run are Derrick Henry centric. So the paths to Ryan Tannehill being able to drop back 35, 36 times and being as efficient as he's been with multiple touchdowns on less than 30 pass attempts so many times this season, that this sort of a box score is also somewhat likely this week. Maybe not 6-7 points, but like maybe he only throws for 175 and 1 touchdown because they just don't have enough opportunity. Even if trailing, that this game could not be played. There's a lot of possibilities this game is not played fast enough for him to get to 30, 35, 40 pass attempts to be able to play from behind and post those garbage time scoring points to his receivers. Yes, it is a possibility. No, he does not need to get 25 or 30 points to pay off his salary theoretically. But on a short slate, you're going to have to have a quarterback that scores you 20 to 29 or more DraftKings points, especially with multiple quarterbacks who do project to have 25 to 35 points. For me, I'm starting this lineup with Lamar Jackson because why the hell not? He's my cover boy. He's been the guy that's scored more DraftKings points at quarterback than basically any other quarterback in history and did it while sitting multiple fourth quarters this year. We're going to start this lineup with him and we're going to move on. Derrick Henry, like I said, I don't think they're going to get as many opportunities. If you want to project that Derrick Henry is going to be playing from ahead, kind of like we projected last week on this video on First Look, then go ahead, plug him in if you think that they're going to play from ahead, because when they play from ahead, he's going to get a ton of looks. And he's a beast running down the field. He is impossible to tackle, led the league in yards after first contact, going to get every single one of their inside the 5 touches at running back and the bulk of the entire play calls inside the 5-yard line. If they can get him active with 2 or 3 screen plays, look out. The possibility for a ceiling game is definitely there because he can break off chunk plays as well as any smaller, quicker, faster running back in the league. But again, my issue is road, underdog, playing from way behind or projected to play from behind in this game, and play volume being a concern for me. I'm not going to have Henry in this lineup. Dalvin Cook is game flow independent, is a underdog on the road against San Francisco, who has been a good defense. He looked real good against New Orleans, 28 DraftKings points. You know he's going to get a ton of looks inside the red zone and definitely inside the 5, which is where he really excelled this year. 28 carries, 3 receptions last week. Expect more of the same, 20 to 25 plus touches. There's going to be ways that you can fit him in. I personally can't fit him in this particular lineup that I'm trying to build right here. Aaron Jones is another one that is more of a want to me at this point on Monday than a need. But Aaron Jones, to me, his success is going to be tied to how much volume he gets. You guys know that I'm very concerned with players' volume, but no player in the league has the volume discrepancies that Aaron Jones has, and those volume discrepancies are tied to when Jamal Williams plays versus when Jamal Williams does not play. And Jamal Williams, the report was that in week 17, if it was a playoff game, then he would have played in that game, but they sat him. So obviously Aaron Jones, in games that Williams leaves early or sits, has massive volume, 25 carries, 2 receptions. The week before, where he left the game early, 23 and 2. If we go to RotoViz and look at their game splits, in games where Aaron Jones had greater than 13 carries, he averaged 30.34 PPR points per game on the back of 122.2 rush yards, versus the 11 games where he had less than 13 carries, he averaged 15 on 43 yards. So the volume for Aaron Jones obviously leads to Aaron Jones scoring more. That's pretty simple and straightforward. So we're going to have to be able to guess what the Green Bay Packers coaches are going to do. If you think that based on the success that he's had the past 2 weeks against Detroit and Minnesota, in Detroit and in Minnesota, that they're going to say, you know what, this is the guy, this is our horse, we're going to give him the ball 20 plus times on the ground this week, and give him the same usage that he's had in the passing game, then in my opinion, Aaron Jones is the best running back probably on this slate. But where we're sitting on Monday, I can't commit to that just yet. And because I wanted to have Lamar Jackson in this lineup, I can't commit to that just yet. But just know that I'm very high on Aaron Jones this week. But his projectability is directly tied to Jamal Williams' availability and what you think that coaching staff is going to do. Mark Ingram, kind of the same thing. I believe that he is a bit diametrically opposed, at least correlation-wise, to Lamar Jackson. You can build tournament lineups with both. Yes, he has caught touchdown passes before, but he's not extremely involved in the passing game, and Lamar Jackson does not drop back 35, 40 times. So if you're putting them both in the same lineup, this is the best case scenario where he does catch a touchdown pass. But realistically speaking, they're opposed to one another in a game where they're expected to score 3-4 touchdowns. They would both have to score one, and when they get around the goal line, it's usually one or the other. It's Lamar runs it in, Lamar passes it, or Mark Ingram runs it in more often than he receives a pass. So again, best case scenario the past couple of weeks, I'm probably not going to have lineups with Ingram and Lamar Jackson, or if I do, they're going to be very few of them if I build 150 lineups this week. Damian Williams does look like one of the better running backs on the slate. Playing at home, favored against a Houston team that has not done a good job stopping opposing running backs, and right now he is the lead dog. I believe that he is going to get the lion's share of the touches at running back in this Andy Reid offense. We know what RB1s have done historically here. We know what Damian Williams has done when he's been the lead back in this offense. At $6K, price is just too cheap for me to ignore. He's the first running back that I want to plug in. Raheem Mostert, playing at home and favored, has taken over the lead job in this offense, and more importantly, getting all of the high leverage inside the 5 carries for basically the past month and a half, scoring a touchdown in every single game since week 12, and has some involvement, though not massive involvement, in the passing game. But this is a game where they are playing at home. They do have a higher team total than I expected at 26.5 points. I want to plug Mostert into this lineup. We're going to put him down here because of the fact that this is an earlier game, and move on to the wide receivers. Davante Adams, another guy like I spoke about earlier, who I really like on this slate, and does not need to be tied to Aaron Jones. You can play him, or to Aaron Jones. Does not need to be tied to his quarterback in order for him to play. You can play him as a one-off with other quarterback stacks and bringbacks. If you're stacking that Houston-Kansas City game, and you can squeeze Davante Adams into one of those lineups if you're finding value elsewhere, he does not need to be played in a quarterback stack or a bring-back play only. He can stand alone. At 7,800, I can't fit him into this lineup, but I am going to have massive exposure. TYREEK Hill, somebody that outside of team stacks also can be used as a one-off. We've seen his ability as a slate breaker for the past few years. Nothing has changed. He's squared up against Houston. Highest team total on the week, highest game total on the week. If you believe that he can get loose behind that secondary, I'm fine with it. Hopkins hasn't seen the volume recently that we expect or want from him, but could see an increased usage this week because of the fact that they should theoretically be playing from behind. He should see some extra targets. He is better in games where Will Fuller plays because his quarterback is better in games where Will Fuller plays. There's a little bit more space for him to work. He's not dependent on anybody. I believe that Hopkins is one of the best talented wide receivers in the league at a time where this is a wide receiver renaissance. Possibly the best wide receiver collection in the history of the NFL from top to bottom that we've ever seen. DeAndre Hopkins is a man among men, standing out as one of the best and most talented wide receivers that we have out there. I want more volume, is basically my only concern. At 7,400, you're definitely going to play him in stacks and bringbacks. I'm fine with it. Same thing with DK Metcalf versus Tyler Lockett. We know that Seattle can do great things with the scoreboard and really make it light up. Metcalf had a massive game last week with 32 DraftKings points, 160 yards, 53-yard catch that ended up going for a touchdown as he fell, got back up because he wasn't touched, and then rolled into the end zone. You guys know how much I love playing DK Metcalf, and I still don't think the price is too restrictive at 6,800 versus where it was before, and versus these other superstars. Because if you look at Hopkins usage and you look at DK Metcalf's usage, they're extremely similar, with Metcalf having a massive lead in terms of end zone and red zone targets. Adam Thielen saw 9 targets himself in the first round of the playoffs, but now squares off against San Francisco. If you believe he's going to get 25+% of the target market share for the Vikings this week playing from behind, I don't have an issue with going with him, but I need to find some value in this lineup. So I need to look for some value wide receivers. I'm going to start with DEEBO Samuel. I know he doesn't get massive volume, but if we're going to attack Minnesota, I want to do it with some of the pass catchers. As I said, the team total is a little bit higher, and we've seen big playability from Samuel. I love the way he looks on the field whenever they get the ball in his hands. Before and after the catch, the kid looks like he's going to be a monster in this league for a bunch of years. And this is a week where I think that we can exploit him, even though he is not going to be somebody who gets, 9, 10, 11 targets. He can get us there on 5 or 6 with his big playability and yards after the catch ability. Will Fuller is somebody who is going to be bantied about a lot this week. You're going to have people that say, well, Will Fuller's back and he is a slate breaker. We've seen it from him in the past. That is true. You're also going to hear from people, Will Fuller is going, even if he plays, he's going to pull his hamstring halfway through the first quarter. That's a little bit anecdotal. I can't predict future injuries, even as injury prone as Will Fuller has been in the past and even this season. If he plays, and if he plays a full game against Kansas City, as good as Kansas City has been against perimeter wide receivers this season versus seasons past, and specifically the last 4 weeks, I'm going to want to have tournament shares of Will Fuller at 5K. I'm not going to plug him into this lineup, but especially if I'm making correlated Houston-Kansas City lineups around either quarterback, Will Fuller is going to be a major part of those. I do think you can also play him as a one-off in other lineups without either quarterback in that game. We're going to have to wait and see what his health looks like as the week goes along. I mentioned I liked Davante Adams. I also like the volume that Allen Lazard has gotten the past 2 weeks leading up to the playoffs, both in games on the road against Detroit and Minnesota. Now he gets a matchup against Seattle. He is a big-bodied wide receiver. All of the attention is going to be paid to Aaron Jones and to Davante Adams. And this is a kid who can bring down balls around the goal line and has the trust of his quarterback. Aaron Rodgers does like the way that he plays and will target him. 17 targets over his past 2 games, only 4,500. I believe that the floor is solid enough, and the touchdown equity that we get from somebody like Allen Lazard also gives me a little bit of confidence at the price point of only 4,500 being a viable value play for us here. And because we have Lamar Jackson in this lineup, a bit of a thin play in my opinion, but Marquise Hollywood Brown is an all or nothing play. So this lineup is going to take more of a tournament look to it. Marquise Brown at 4,400. Again, somebody else with slate breaking capabilities and has an advantage over these Tennessee DBs or Tennessee defensive backs who I believe can be exploited with this offense that they run. There are going to be a couple of shots downfield to Marquise Brown this week because of everything that Tennessee is going to have to do to try and stop the run. There will be a chance that Marquise Brown will get 3 or 4 shots over 25 yards downfield to really make an impact on this slate. And it really only takes one. And we've seen him do it multiple times this year, where he has had 21 points, 18 points, 16 points, 33 points. Admittedly, I believe that this play is a bit thin and tournament only. If I'm going to build a tournament lineup, I want to capture as much of the upside as possible, and Marquise Brown definitely gives me that. At tight end, I think this is one of those rare weeks where we can go double tight end in a lineup for tournaments, where usually I X that out, but I'm going to keep it to just a few tight ends. Looking at the cheaper guys, Jimmy Graham, if you want to play the contrarian play and get away from Davante Adams, or get away from Lazard, or get away from Aaron Jones, and you want to say the leverage play is to get to Jimmy Graham here, as I think the touchdowns will go to him for only 3,300. There's not a whole lot of risk at the price point that he's at, considering the other tight ends on the slate that are cheap. Kyle Rudolph, kind of the same sort of a play, but in a worse situation, going up against the San Francisco linebacking core, who has done very well. Very much both of these guys a touchdown dependent play. If you take the touchdown late game away from Kyle Rudolph, it would remove one more catch, but let's say we keep that catch. This is 7.1 DraftKings point day. The touchdown really made his day at 13.4. Rudolph is extremely touchdown dependent, way more so in my opinion than Jimmy Graham, even though Graham is also a touchdown dependent play. Hollister has been up and down based on his usage. 3, 6, 8, 4 at 4,000. I think he's fine. You could argue to get him in, but understand that his floor is not an 8 or a 9 point floor at 4K. That's just not what he has. He could end this game with 3 targets. He could end this game with 9 targets. So I'm avoiding there. Mark Andrews, we're gonna have to monitor his injury status throughout the week. If he's available and active and 100% by the weekend, obviously with the volume that he's gotten and the big playability that he carries with him anytime that he takes the field, Mark Andrews certainly in play. I'm not going to use him in this lineup. I'm going to pay up for the 2 super stud players at tight end, starting with George Kittle, who has been an absolute beast recently, before, after the catch, on running plays, everywhere. He's all over the field. And I'm not sure that Minnesota, or anybody else for that matter, can stop him. Good path towards 100 yards receiving here. Great path to 7 to 12 targets for him. And a good amount of usage in the red zone. And the final tight end that I want to play, the final flex play that I want to plug into this lineup, is Travis Kelce, coming off of a disappointing week 17 game with a bye week and a game against Houston and the playoffs. Tons of volume headed his way, 97 catches at the tight end position at 6,400 versus the other plays. If you look at the wide receiver plays that are priced 1,000 to 1,500 more than him, I think that Travis Kelce is in that same boat where he can get me a 20 to 30 point game at way less salary. So I'm going to plug him in there, leaving us 3,000 for a defense. What do you know? It worked out. That's going to do it for this week. I wish you guys the best of luck. I will be back later in the week. Friday is our Q&A on Twitch. Drop by Twitch, give us a follow. I will hopefully get to meet you guys there. And then that video will be posted Friday afternoon. Look out for those other podcasts, my article every Thursday.
He's a legend.